Morning, everyone. We welcome you to the Wednesday, October the 9th meeting of the Board of Trustees for the Utah Transit Authority. We will get started and invite you to stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next item up is our Safety First Minute with Sheldon Shaw. Good morning, Sheldon.
Good morning, Chair, Trustees. Appreciate the opportunity to give the Safety First Minute, and I have a slide here. It's October is National Protect Your Hearing Month, and so it's important that we do what we can as an agency and protect ourselves too. And what I have up there is a hierarchy of controls. How can we solve the problem of being exposed to noise? The OSHA standards are, if it's above 85 decibels, we have to have hearing protection available. If it's above 90, we have to wear it. And if it's above 105, we have to have double hearing protection. And so an example is mowing your lawn is about 96 decibels. So if you're out mowing your lawn, you should have hearing protection on. You're almost to the point where you should have double hearing protection. But if you take a look at the hierarchy controls, PPE is the bottom. The least effective way we can protect ourselves is to wear that hearing protection. There's things we can do that are better. We can change the way people work, and so if we have a big lawn to mow, let's rotate that. Let's not make the same person do the whole job and have several people take turns, and so we can do it that way. Can we isolate people from the hazard? And so doesn't make sense to have the windows open if we're mowing the lawn, so let's not expose people inside the building as we're mowing the lawn. Can we get quieter equipment or tools? Maybe we can buy an electric mower instead of gas mower, which would greatly reduce the decibels. And then finally, maybe we can zero-scape the yard, and so we don't have to mow, and we eliminate the noise altogether. And so as we try to control hazards, close calls that we come across, we should look at this hierarchy of controls and what's the best way to solve it. And oftentimes PPE or SOPs aren't the best answer. We can do better. Thanks.
Good advice.
Sheldon,
I have a question for you,
Sheldon. I have a question. And what's the decibel at the typical rock concert?
I have a few examples here. I don't have that one. A chainsaw is about 120, and a diesel locomotive passing you at 45 is about 80 decibels.
So a typical rock concert would probably be higher than a chainsaw.
Yes, yes.
Is that perhaps the reason that teenagers and young adults are hard of hearing?
It probably is, and I'm sure we all know someone who can't hear very well, and so it's something that we should all be aware of. Now, the OSHA standard is for an 8-hour time-weighted average is what we're concerned with, and so if we can just lessen that exposure, and so rock concert's not going to last 8 hours, so which is a good thing.
But it's much higher than 120.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that reminder. It's good information.
Thank you. It is great information. Let's go any public comment, Bob?
We don't have any cards today.
Okay, thank you. That brings me to my consent agenda, or to the consent agenda, which includes the approval of a couple sets of minutes.
I move that we approve the consent agenda consisting of the minutes for the budget work session on September the 26th and a board meeting last week, October the 2nd.
A second.
Motion and a second. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That motion passes. Thank you. Next item up is our agency report. Carolyn, good morning.
Good morning. I just have a few items, or just a couple items actually. One is this Saturday is the Maintenance Careers Open House on October 12th. From 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. and that information allows them to join a shop tour, take a look around, and we're looking for all different types of maintenance careers or maintenance employees for the various careers that we have here. So that will be this Saturday. Another item I wanted to mention to you that came in just this week or yesterday actually is that there was a request for service on Friday, which would typically require board approval, but it's a request for a meeting transportation for City of Vineyard, Mayor Fulmer, to request transportation for a tour of the Vineyard Frontrunner site and along that area, as well as some of the UVU development site and how that relates to the transportation system. So I just wanted to advise you on that. We'll bring that back next week, at least to let you know how much that activity would cost. But if you have any comments, it's not on the agenda for action, but just wanted to let you know.
Is that the visit this Friday?
Yes.
Okay.
When Carolyn spoke to me, and we may need to figure out if there's a simple way or a de minimis amount that we just delegate to her, and I think her staff is working on that for something like this. And ideally, we would have had it in time, but nevertheless, it seems like a reasonable accommodation. But unless the board has concern. Okay.
Yeah, we would come back with something on not just what a cost level may be, but also some of the objectives so that type of service would be actually meeting the objectives of what we're seeing.
Some
Consistency, and we'll work with Bob and Monica.
I did have a quick question though, in terms of, obviously that's a construction site, 'cause it's not completed yet. Do they have different requirements to tour that area, or do we have any requirements? 'Cause since we own the land, I just wasn't.
I don't think so, because there's no, I don't know how much construction's going on right now. I think she just wants to take a look at sort of how everything is related in that area in terms of the station and pretty much the transportation and how that would work with the development site.
Thanks.
Anything else, Carolyn?
That concludes my report.
Okay, thank you. Next item is follow-up to some prior discussions, both in our budget workshops and also in our board meeting and with the advisory council, and that's a resolution adopting our 2020-2024 capital plan. Mary, good morning.
Good morning. We're coming to you now to adopt the 5-year capital plan. We presented it to you and then to the advisory council, and there were just a few little edits that I wanted to point out. One of the things that we added to the last page of the text of the plan was for the multi-year projects. We've identified several multi-year projects that we would want to be guaranteeing the funding for over through 2022. And these are the construction projects that we would be entering multi-year contracts, and then also the long lead items that we'd want to be purchasing. Another change we made was moving the TVM basic compliant from bonding to leasing. And then we also changed the name of a project. We were calling it the Vineyard Double Track. We thought it was more appropriate to call it the Northern Utah County Double Track. So those are the 3 changes that have been made.
Do any of those changes impact the total dollar amount?
No, it stays the same.
Thank you.
Other questions for Mary?
No, I just wanted to thank you for your work on this, and that last minute changes about names and everything is great. I know that they'll be appreciated.
And I appreciate both your work and the others that to get to this multi-year kind of scenario. I think it'll be better use of budget on an annual basis, but certainly lends itself to some predictability for future years.
It helps a lot.
And knowing that these projects number of them will be multi-year projects. So, if there are no other questions, I would entertain a motion on this resolution.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we adopt the authority's 2020 to 2024 capital plan as outlined by staff.
Second?
I have a motion and a second on resolution R2019-10-02, and I'll ask for a roll call.
Trustee Holbrook,
Aye.
Trustee Millington,
Aye.
Chair Christensen.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. I think the next section, I just remember looking at it and saying Bob's going to be up there for a while. But the first item up is authorizing the issuance and sale by the authority for sales tax revenue and refunding bonds in the aggregate amount, but not to exceed $540 million.
Okay, thank you.
Want to explain the resolution?
Sure. So the resolution does a couple of things. It authorizes the designated officers to proceed with the bond issue within certain parameters. You mentioned one of them, no more than 540 million, no more, the interest rates cannot exceed 5%, the maturity can't be more than 26 years, and the bonds can't be sold at a price not less than 98% of the total principal amount. So no deep discount is the way to think of that. As far as the designated officers, it's the board chair and either the executive director or me. So there's two people involved, likely all three of us. If for some reason the board chair is not available, the board chair can designate one of the other trustees to serve in this function. It also authorizes the use of the preliminary official statement and then the changes that would turn that into an official statement. So what would happen from here is if the board approves the resolution, we go to the State Bonding Commission next Wednesday to talk to them to seek their approval. Once we have their approval, we intend to come back here October 30th to provide you with an update of what the numbers look like. And then we're targeting November 6th for the bond sale. I think we've told the board before to look at the 10-year treasuries to see how this issue is going to go. Those have been trending downward, but one of the developments in the last few weeks is that there's so much taxable securities being sold right now that the margin over the 10-year treasury has increased. So even though the rates have gone down, that margin's increased, and so the numbers I heard about yesterday, they're not as favorable. You know, the first issue where we had the 14% net present values down around 12. The second refunding is kind of marginal right now, and we'll make that decision as we get closer, but we certainly want to continue to look at that as we go forward. And then the restructuring is still good. And of course, the new money, the $75 million for the capital plan you just approved, that's tax exempt, and those rates have held steady.
Bob, I mean, is there something in the resolution that sort of acknowledges the bonding commission? Obviously, legally we are, but I assume there's some reference.
Yes, there's a provision in there, and Blake can talk about that. Blake, you want to come up and talk about that?
I mean, it's kind of our first time with them, and I mean, we've made a presentation to them, but.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, we do make reference in the recitals that subject to going to the State Bonding Commission and their approval. So we've indicated that and indicated within the resolution itself that you would consult with the State Bonding Commission and receive their approval prior to the issuance of the bonds.
Then, is it just because of the volume of taxable bonds in the market that causes that sort of a little more unfavorable circumstance? Or?
Yes, maybe Bob McKinney can come up and talk about that. He's the one out there doing the pricing. We've been doing the pricing, I think, every week when I'm looking at this.
There we go. I turned it on and off. Thank you. That is a fair and good question. Volume is, as you're contemplating moving forward with taxable advance refunding, so too are many others because they're seeing the same opportunity, right? Yeah. The volume, as we're seeing every week, is more and more taxable bonds are being sold. And it's really the 10-year par call that everybody wants to preserve, which is what we told you the first time we met, was we'll sell these bonds with the option for you to refund them at a future date using that 10-year par call. If you were to sell these bonds with what the corporate investor typically buys, is what they call a make-whole call. Without getting too technical, it doesn't allow you to refund the bonds for savings. It just allows you to refund them and get out of them at some point, but you would never be able to get savings from a make-whole call. That's what the taxable investor typically sees when they buy a taxable security. And in the municipal world, tax-exempt world, we typically use a 10-year par call, so it's a little foreign to them. So a number of investors will raise their hand and say, I'm not going to buy a bond that has something that you can call me out of, and that doesn't help them manage their portfolio as well as the make-whole call. So there's more of a limited universe, and to try and get those investors to come to the table, we sort of have to increase yields to get that smaller universe of taxable investors to buy a bond with the 10-year par call. And what you're seeing now is that limited universe, people are starting to raise rates to try and bring them to the table.
The folks that are typically parked over in the non-taxable portion, I would assume their volume is going down because of these sort of lacking of refunding opportunities. Do they somehow just ever change markets and go look at other ones, or are they kind of the same folks?
Well, a taxable and tax exempt investor sometimes will cross over when they look at what we call ratios, sort of if I can buy a tax exempt bond that has a taxable equivalent yield higher than what I can buy in a straight taxable, they'll cross over and do that.
Okay.
Right. And the good thing is the tax exempt curve, tax exempt rates have started to trend down as well. And of course, it's not the largest part of your transaction, but that part is looking even better because tax exempt rates continue to move lower. So you're saving money on that portion of the loan.
Questions? Do you have any questions?
No, just to kind of make sure I'm understanding this. Structurally, this was kind of anticipated in the sense that obviously with rates going down, that there's going to be a general perspective that people are going to want to do something along these lines. What do you anticipate that people getting into the market to such an extent that it will change it and make it completely not worthwhile, or is that not how this would typically work?
You want me to address that, Brian? Your municipal advisor sitting down there. As the underwriter, I can tell you, and Bob did preface his comments with that 2015 refunding, which that has dropped to a level where it's sort of right at the 5% savings level. And I know Bob the first time around said that's sort of where we want to get those savings. They dipped a little bit below because of that. And if rates continue to widen, that's probably the bond that would fall out of this, or the refunding that would fall out of this. Do we anticipate that to be the case? We sort of like and hope to see the market stabilize where it is now, but it just sort of depends on volume as we move forward. And this transaction is scheduled to come the first week of November, so we've still got, pretty much a month or, 3 weeks.
And there's really two things we'll look at on that one. One is the net present value savings, kind of that 5% rule of thumb, but we'll also look at the efficiency. If we want it to hit a certain threshold for efficiency, or it doesn't make sense to move forward either. So we'll look at both of those.
There currently, it's pressed in the market about a 75% chance that the Fed will cut rates at their next meeting. So there's a possibility that the momentum in the market is lent towards lower rates. There's obviously no guarantees. There continues to be volatility. The first time you see, with Build America bonds, with other things that in developments in the municipal market, you'll see a quick widening in kind of spreads or in fees or in things like that when a new development takes place. But as Bob mentioned, we do expect that to stabilize. And so we wouldn't expect to see spreads continuing to, there's a certain point where if the spreads widen enough that you'll see tons of crossover buyers, or you'll see others enter the market because the absolute yields would just be that attractive on a relative basis. And so we wouldn't see that continuing to gap out the way it did over the last couple of weeks. We'd hope to see some settling and consolidating.
Other questions? Okay.
Let's go do it.
Well, with no other questions, I would entertain a motion on this particular resolution.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we approve Resolution R2019-10-03, the resolution authorizing the issuance and sale by the authority of its sales tax revenue and refunding bonds in the aggregate principal amount not to exceed $540 million.
I'll second.
And note that it includes the famous term "in related matters," right?
Yeah.
With that, I'll ask for a roll call.
Trustee Millington?
Aye.
Trustee Holbrook?
Aye.
Chair Christensen?
Aye.
It's unanimous. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. That brings us to item number 9, a resolution approving a Fifth Amendment of the authority's 2019 budget.
So this Fifth Amendment is related to the prior action. The only thing, the only thing this Fifth Amendment does is add $75 million to the 2019 budget, capital budget, for the new money portion that would fund the earlier item, the 5-year capital plan items that would be bonded.
Any questions for Bob?
No.
If none, I would entertain a motion on this resolution.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve R 2019-10-04, the resolution approving a Fifth Amendment of the Authority's 2019 budget.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. I'll ask for a roll call.
Trustee Holbrook,
Aye.
Trustee Millington,
Aye.
Chair Christensen.
Aye,
It's unanimous. Thank you.
thanks. That, looks like it leaves you off the hook on item number 10, which is a resolution authorizing the execution of Amendment 1 to an interlocal cooperation agreement with Salt Lake County regarding matching funds for the Tiger Grant programs. I would just note as Mary's coming forward that the original agreement I had responsibility for in my prior role with Salt Lake County, but obviously I don't have any role, and I don't have any role in this particular interlocal, but somebody might look at the original document and see my name on there, so just make that known.
So this is for the Tiger First Mile, Last Mile project. We enter into agreements with all of our stakeholder partners for this project. And in those agreements, it typically says if the project goes over the estimated costs, that the partners will help fund that difference. And so for 2 of the projects, the South Jordan Herman Draper bike lanes and the Parley's Trail improvements, after final design and getting the contractor pricing and negotiating those prices, we need an additional $122,035 to complete that. And so Salt Lake County has stepped up and are willing to provide that money through their catnip fund. It's called County Active Transportation Network Improvement Programming. So this,
I love catnip.
I just want you to know,
that's a
I
much
did not
better
give
way
the
to say it.
acronym and it stuck. I tried, didn't go away.
so this resolution would just authorize that additional funding from the county.
Sorry, I didn't mean to
No,
throw in my editorial Freudian twitch there, so.
I think we should have Salt Lake County and anyone else come up with some unique ways to identify these projects.
Any questions for Mary?
No.
Okay. If there are none, I'll entertain a motion on this resolution.
I move that we approve Resolution R 219-10-05, resolution authorizing execution of the Amendment 1 to the interlocal cooperation agreement with Salt Lake County regarding matching funds for the Tiger Grant projects.
I will second the catnip project.
I have a motion and a second. I'll ask for a roll call.
Trustee Millington,
Aye.
Trustee Holbrook,
Aye.
Chair Christensen.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Next up are contracts, disbursements, and grants. And first is a contract on a consolidated timekeeping and scheduling with Kronos. And you don't look like Troy Bingham, so
I'm not. I'm Rob Lamp filling in for him today.
that's great. Thank you.
Okay, so this contract is for a replacement of TC1, which is the current timekeeping software used by our maintenance and customer service employees. It is not being supported currently, and so we need to replace it before we have any issues and have to go to paper time cards for those employees. This system will also include the hourly admin employees and the employees that we currently have on paper time cards. So it brings a total of 1,000 employees will be using this system to enter their time. The contract also replaces 31 time clocks throughout the organization, adding them at buildings that we didn't have them prior. The total cost for the 5-year cost is $454,158, and $480,000 was budgeted in the 2019 capital budget for this project.
So do you have any idea of how many time systems that brings us down to? Is it just 2 at that point?
It brings us down to 3 still. We still would have the salary admin employees entering their time into JD Edwards, but this system would be capable of handling them as well. Yeah, consolidating down to 2.
That sounds like a good shift. Any questions, though?
I just had a quick question. So is this system have any ability to connect with JD Edwards, or is that completely separate?
It will. So that was one of the big points we brought up to the vendors when we went out for RFP is how does this communicate with JD Edwards? And it'll talk back and forth kind of at our choosing. We can have it almost live or update every night back and forth. But yeah, that was a big point we wanted.
Good question. All right. Well, if there aren't any other questions, I would entertain a motion on this contract.
I move that we approve the contract for the consolidated timekeeping and scheduling with Kronos Incorporated.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck on the implementation. Next item
That's
up
always a trick.
is a change order for purchase order for mobile gateways with Sierra Wireless. Dan Armith is with us. And
All right, good morning.
tell me who Sierra Wireless is. Are they
Sierra
part-
Wireless, I actually brought a
Oh, good.
example of one of the modems, or one of the gateways, so that you could see it actually in person. So Sierra Wireless is a major vendor that manufactures these mobile gateways, and you can put 1 or 2 SIM cards in here for various cellular companies, and you connect these to the antennas on the top of the vehicles, and you can connect various components in the bus into the gateways. So this gateway controls the communication between the MDC in the bus, the automated passenger counter system in the bus, the video system in the bus, the electronic fare collection readers in the bus, so that there's a constant communication back to our systems back here, and they get near real-time information in the bus. Also helps with the turn-by-turn navigations. So we have one of these in each bus. We have about 675 buses right now with these in it. This purchase request is to complete the upgrade of the new modems, new gateways into the buses. This is 145 of these in this purchase. And the reason why the upgrade is the old gateways are going end of life, end of support. And from end of support, meaning they don't push any security patches. So this also protects the network from cybersecurity as well. And this was budgeted for $217,000, and this is the 145 of these are costing about $206,000. So, any questions?
One question I had, Dan, is what kind of speed are you getting over the cellular? I mean, do you have a lot of latency of pushing of data, or is it fairly real time?
We get fairly real time through the cellular. We also have a system for all the Sierra Wireless. It's a Sierra a master system that allows us to see where all the gateways are and what their signal strength is, and if it's good, bad, and if there's any problems on the Sierra routers or gateways. And then the controlling system, we can also push any patches to it or any firmware patches to it as well. So we can monitor how these are actually doing out in the field
Then
through the
how do
master
you
system.
choose your cellular? I realize it's a separate contract or separate agreements, but how do you choose your cellular service over to get you the data feed? Or just
Right now, we are standardized on mostly AT&T, and it depends on the IT group in the past number of years have looked at the coverage, and AT&T has the best coverage for our coverage, our service areas. So AT&T right now, we have
the SIM cards and all these. As other carriers improve, or maybe they go to 5G, then we should relook in the future at what we have.
We're not locked into AT&T necessarily.
We're not locked in. We can actually switch the SIM cards, and we can cancel a SIM card. We can activate another one and just slip it inside the front of this gateway. You could actually put two. I can have an AT&T and a Verizon or a T-Mobile SIM card in it, and then the gateway would actually pick which is the strongest at the exact second it wants to send a packet out and receive it.
Questions?
Yeah, you mentioned that this is for 145. How many do we need how many additional will we need to buy to completely equip the bus fleet? Or does this finish the bus fleet?
This finishes our current operational bus fleet. We have some 99 buses that are going end of life and they're being phased out. So we're not replacing the gateways in those buses. Any new buses that are being purchased, part of the cost of the buses include these gateways. So that's just part of the bus build out. So this 145 will complete our current operational fleet.
So I had a question on how long is the lifespan of that particular modem at this point? Because obviously you mentioned that the previous lifespan was expiring on those other ones.
Yes, thank you for the question. About 7 to 8 years. So we were actually one of the first transit agencies to actually put these type of gateways in our buses and not have 5 different antennas on the roof and everything has its own feeds. So we've had them about 7 to 8 years, and that's why they're going end of life, which is a pretty long time for a piece of equipment that's running all the time and in the heat and the cold that the buses are running.
Thank you.
And this is more out of curiosity, obviously, but how long, are they pretty resilient? Or do you find yourself having to sort of nurse them a lot?
Apologize, I don't have the maintenance information, but I don't hear at all from my maintenance staff any complaints about the Sierra wireless gateways. This is their product of choice, so they're pretty happy with it.
Any other questions? If there are none, I would entertain a motion on this change order.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that we approve the change order, purchase order for the mobile gateways, Sierra Wireless.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That motion passes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for bringing the actual example. It's helpful.
Yeah, we should maybe consider that next time around. Although Eddie doesn't need to bring any trains, just saying.
Next up is a discussion on a pre-procurement for a future of light rail study. Mary, you're back with us. Welcome.
Hello again. So this is pre-procurement. We want to go out with a procurement for a future of light rail study. And the study will evaluate and recommend capital and surface improvements to the tracks and streetcar system to improve its function and to accommodate growth. And we would like to conduct the study in 2 phases. The first phase would be more of an existing conditions report, what would look at existing performance and analysis and preliminary considerations. And then the second phase will screen and select specific projects and develop an implementation plan. And we also are splitting into 2 phases so we can look at the results of the Point of the Mountain study to see if that has any light rail recommendations. So if it did, it could be incorporated into phase 2 of the study.
Can I ask a question? So in sort of our budget wrap-up session, some discussion about the current state of light rail crossings. We're repairing them or replacing them fast enough to stay up with them. Will this study speak to those, the state of those? Or
No.
When you say state of, I just...
No, this is
wondering.
more the operational and, how we function and the ridership and things like that and what operational changes or system changes may improve.
So it's heavily operationally focused.
Correct.
Okay.
And aside from Point of the Mountain, is there anything else focused on the growth aspect, or is it just strictly as it exists?
Right, the phase one is just what's existing. Phase two would look at maybe any new, look at the long-range plan right now and see what other projects are in there. And then this would allow us to recommend to Wasatch Front and to MAG what we think should be added into the long-range plan regarding our light rail projects.
So, and maybe this could be included with that phase two. I presented with the Legislative Policy Summit, which had all the legislators, and in the open introductory remark and also in our meetings with Speaker Wilson, he commented like a little bit out of frustration, not necessarily toward UTA, but we seem to plan in a reactive way. And I think he was obviously speaking to these high growth areas and thinking about, and of course the money's never enough to deploy the infrastructure in advance of it. Although we certainly have a case like that with the Red Line. And it's pretty hard for me to go to a community in the southwest quadrant of Salt Lake County where they don't say, are you going to extend this rail beyond there? And I know a study's been done, and it's probably, ridership isn't there yet. And there's probably a lot of factors to that, but I'm just wondering how much of it will take into account sort of where those growth projections are anticipating.
Yeah, the phase two will definitely look at that, look at future growth, where it makes sense to extend if we wanted to extend, and
Okay.
yeah, for sure.
Any questions?
I just had a follow-up on that a little bit. So the goal with the future portion of this study is to say to WFRC and to MAG that these are the recommendations and that they should be incorporated within the long range if they aren't already. Is that correct? And that's not really, it doesn't identify funding or doesn't anything else other than here's what we think that should be in the future.
Yeah, I'm going to call Levi up here to see. I don't think we were looking at funding in that study, but I'm going to let him address that.
Well, we were looking at potential funding sources.
Get your mic there.
Sorry, there it
You're
is.
good.
We were looking at potential funding sources, and a big part of it is recommendations to the long-range plan, but there will be kind of smaller projects that come out of it as well that we would look at, kind of outside of the long-range plan that would improve our system, that don't necessarily rise to that level of, extending lines and things like that.
So for instance, if there's an operational side of that aspect, that would be incorporated in that as well for a cost issue or?
Right.
Right? Okay,
Yes.
thanks.
Other questions? Okay. So you're going to venture forward on some procurement. When do you anticipate maybe having selected somebody?
Well, the procurement is ready to go out on the street, so once we get your
So
approval,
fairly
that will go out, and I believe it is we give them 3 weeks for
Yeah, 3 weeks to a month. It might be a month.
Okay,
Yeah.
sure.
to respond, and then.
Well, and I believe this is information only, if I'm not mistaken, so thank you. Next up, item 12. Did you have anything else? I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, but I'm here for the next one, so
Oh,
I'm
okay.
just sitting here.
Oh, D, sorry, I missed on D. Thank you, Ken. Workplace electric vehicle charging.
Okay, so this is 2 grant opportunities for the same project. It's for workplace electric vehicle charging infrastructure. And the first is through the Department of Environmental Quality. They have an ongoing program where they will fund up to 50% of the cost to purchase and install eligible charging equipment. And then the second one complements that. It's through Rocky Mountain Power. They have funding available that would reimburse 75% of the cost to purchase, but would not reimburse any of the installation cost. So we just estimated the charging and the installation cost, and the total project would be about $259,000 to do 39 chargers, and we would spread them out throughout the system. There's a chart in the back showing there would be 10 here at front lines and then others throughout the system. And if we got both of those grants, we would still have to pay about $55,000 depending on installation cost for that. If we just got one of the grants, it would be more, but.
I've never seen a group of 10 generally, unless you're at Costco. And then but even at Costco, I don't think there's 10. I mean, do we even have the demand for 10 at this site, for example? And I just wondered, like, could they be better dispersed elsewhere, or even park and ride lots? Or
I'm not exactly sure how they came up with those, but yeah, we could disperse it or we could reduce the number. But let me.
Or if I didn't know if we were looking at more fleet that were
Tracy's not
electric
here.
vehicles, or
We have a number of electric vehicle cars right now that our employees use, and this may encourage more. And maybe one day we might go to electric fleet ourselves, and this would accommodate that.
And that's my only concern as you go forward. And I just as a how many what's the capacity of or the need of that site, and whatever that analysis is. I'm not against the grant or.
I agree, and I like the idea of maybe looking at our park and rides and see if there's opportunities there. I don't know, and I recognize the scope might not be at that level, but I think that could even have some, value as well. So just thanks, I appreciate that. So I agree. I think this is a great opportunity.
All right. Any other questions? Okay. I think that's it for you, Mary.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Next up is item 12, which is a service and fare approvals. This includes fare parameters for the South Salt Lake County Microtransit project. Monica, and looks like you're joined by...
Yes, good morning. I have Jaron and Andrea with me today. And so we're seeking your feedback and approval on specific fare parameters for the South Salt Lake County Microtransit pilot. And this is in relation to Board Policy 4.1, which requires approval for pilot programs, promotions, and special priced products related to fares. This pilot will launch next month, and the dates are expected to be 12 months. The pilot will be 12 months after the launch date. I just wanted to clarify that. The dates in the memo suggested through August. In preparation for the launch of this pilot, we've been evaluating the processes related to fares, administration, and collection, taking into account the unique service characteristics of this microtransit service, and that is different than the current services that we run. And so there's several considerations we've taken into account. Included in the board packet is a handout that outlined our recommended fare processes and parameters, and I'll review some of them and let you ask any questions that you might have. So we're proposing a weekly pass. This would be a new product. We currently don't offer a weekly pass, but this weekly pass would just be for the pilot, and it will be $18.75, which is our group day pass rate, and the service is 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, so that was multiplied by 5. We think the weekly pass will be a good opportunity to see if there's a need for this type of a pass, and we're also via suggested that we trial this because that will help keep our costs down for our fees that we're paying on credit cards. The second one and the third one are both related to fare media. So we're limited on the fare media that we will be able to accept. We will not plan on accepting cash, tokens, or fare pay cards. But we would like to allow another app on the mobile phone. We currently have the Passport app, the Go Ride app, and we're introducing a second app. This will be the Via mobile app that riders can download for this service. Our reduced fare will work a little bit different than it does now. We will actually require a one-time code that needs to be entered upon the reduced fare riders' first use of the system, and they'll need to get that code through customer service by applying for a reduced fare program. And once they have that code, every ride after, it'll be attached to their account from that time forward, and they'll get 50% off on a going forward basis. Transfers will be similar to how they exist now, but we are not allowing transfers from Microtransit to Microtransit. For every Microtransit trip, you will pay one time. However, we will allow your Microtransit trip to transfer to other services. And we will, there will be in the app a timestamp. We will do, I believe it is 2.5 hours from that timestamp that they can transfer either to Trax or Bus, and they will get $2.50 credit. And fare inspection for this Microtransit service will be visual validation. We don't have any type of readers, electronic readers on board this service right now, and so we will allow the Microtransit service drivers to just visually inspect any electronic fare cards that are presented to them, any monthly passes. Obviously, we don't tap those anyway, but it'll all be done visually. There will not be any electronic readers for the launch right now. Any questions this far on either fare media or the past product transfers or inspection or comments?
What is your credit card processing fee?
It really just varies by whether it's American Express or Visa, and a lot of those are blended and hidden. And we'll hopefully be able to have that once we see some transactions come through. But based on past experience, we've seen it as high as $0.25 to 35 cents when all is said and done.
I mean, that's kind of what I'm remembering when the city went to a parking meter system, and you know, whether you charged $1 for a half hour or $2 for an hour, there's sort of this threshold where it didn't make sense. And I don't know if Bob can answer this question, but in the 2.1 million is roughly like whatever we budgeted for this Microtransit project. Was there, how much fare box recovery was anticipated with that fee, or is that covering cost of operations?
Yeah, from what I understand, none.
So I guess where I'm going with it, and you know, you're famous now with the poster of all of our fare
Oh,
options.
great.
but it highlights the complexity of it. Like,
Agree.
To somehow communicate all of these options to somebody. Like I didn't get lost, but I got I zoned out about halfway through, and I thought to myself, that's too complicated. And I just wondered, with all the challenges, the cost of processing a credit card, I mean, are you better off just picking them up for free, and then when they connect to our system, collecting through their normal fare box recovery? And you'll get a few that'll take it. You know, if they live in Bluffdale and they work in Draper, they may take it for free. I could see that. But I'm just thinking in the bottom line, is there a reason we have to charge a fare?
Yeah, we've tossed that back and forth. You know, a couple of things, we would not anticipate doing that in the future long term. And so by charging a fare, we can actually pilot the fare collection and processes and make sure that when we do go to collect down the road, that they are something that we can sustain long term. So I think that it's not off the table. We have definitely talked about that. I'll let Andrea and Jaron also speak more to some of the fare promotions, which would include either going out the gate for a lower fare or for a free fare. They can speak to that a little bit more, but the reason that we are suggesting fare collection at least at some point throughout this pilot, is to be able to test the processes, because they are different from what we're experiencing now.
So, excuse me. So I know that VIA, right, is the provider. It's VIA. I know that they do other metropolitan areas, and I'm just curious if they had any best practices, because obviously part of this pilot is designed to do the data collection in general, to try and understand where potential riders are and how everything works. Do they have any recommendations in this type of a market? Just curious.
Yeah, just to clarify, so it's VIA, just to clarify. And yeah, so we've looked at how different markets have tested fare products in accordance with microtransit pilots, and it really does afford anywhere from a no cost to a premium cost. So really, as Monica's talked about this, and Andrew can help speak to this too as well, is one thing we really like the opportunity to do throughout the course of the pilot is test how fare promotions and discounts can help drive ridership and exposure to the program. So working with Andrea's team as we look towards our marketing strategies and working with VIA towards best practices, there's going to be various times throughout the course of the 12 months pilot that we may want to test various discounts and promotions to help gain ridership and exposure, and then understand how that really works with the system overall and get that experience, because it's important we do have a good understanding of how fares can be collected if this becomes a permanent service down the road.
Maybe let me ask the question, unless you've got a question ready.
I've got a few. Explain to me again how I order and pay for a ride. It seemed like it was very complicated. I have to download some kind of an app, and I have to wander here and there, and I get a week-long pass and for $18 and something cents, and how often can I use it in a week? And it sounds to me like it's really complicated.
Well, so Trustee, I think looking at this pilot from the very beginning, we knew that trying to include all of our different fare products is going to be complicated, and it's something we need to work through.
Okay,
So
then why don't we just cut to the chase and say it costs you $1 to get on, costs you every time. Let's make it really simple.
So
why are we relying on our past fare practices, which are complicated to begin with, on a pilot? Let's start with the pilot fresh and clean.
So to continue to answer your question, I mean, our goal is to simplify this. And so your question was how do you pay for your fare and how do you use the service? And so our customers will use a mobile phone application of which they can then request a trip and within the parameters that we've set up for the service.
So I have to download an application in order to order a ride.
That is what we're pushing, but to ensure that this service is available to the entire public, the short answer is no. We'll have an option for a customer to call in as well,
okay,
to make sure we're opening the service up to the entire public. But yes, we would like to push our customers to an application for them to request a ride, and based upon the service being on demand and them being able to being picked up within this service area, the app helps our customers and the service know where to go when they're being picked up and how they dispatch vehicles in accordance with picking up other customers along the way. The service really relies upon the technology.
Can I ask sorry.
Go ahead.
Can I ask a question on the technology? Could you, I guess 950 is intended, is it an unlimited pass, the weekly pass? Or?
Correct.
So I just wondered.
Except with the exception of, you would only be able to do up to 3 microtransit rides a day, no more than that.
Per day?
Per
Correct.
day. Oh, okay. Well, the other thing I wondered about is it easy? I mean, I assume that weekly pass is through the VIA app, right? I just wondered, is there just a way for them to basically, put down the $10 or $9.50 and then utilize whatever trips? I mean, just have it kind of dock off of that, or kind of take off that. So you only get the merchant fee once. I don't think most people, if they're going to use a debit or a credit card, mind coming up with $9.50. Then they can use it whenever they feel like they need to use it.
Sure, so it's not a 7-day, but it's more like decrementing the use.
Yeah, you give so many
Like a
rides
wallet?
for the 950 or something like that. Then it's a little simpler. And if they only using it once that week, they don't lose the 950. Because if you charge them $1, you're only going to collect, roughly 70 cents at the end of the deal. And, they're probably just not going to use it for that one. I mean, they might, but I think if they have something sort of built in, they can, use it as they need it. And I just seems to me that that's a bigger draw. It's not too unreasonable for them to come up with that fee, especially if they can connect to the rest of our system.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I can take that back and look at it.
I think, can you explain a little bit about the fare and then the promotion pricing?
Okay, so I'm kind of trying to summarize all the comments here. So I think, and Monica and Jaron can chime in. So to the question about why we're proceeding with the fare on this product is, as Monica indicated, it is a pilot, and so we want to test as many real-time scenarios if we were to, fully and permanently put this into our basket of services. So we want to test all of those scenarios. As far as to the question of complexity, I think we all are in agreement that our fare but we are also trying to proceed with the microtransit pilot in a way that is as best integrated with the rest of our services and with our other fare products as possible. Because there's an aspect of this that could be a first last mile solution for transit users. So we do want people to have an easy transition if they come from Trax or Front Runner or a bus and take a microtransit trip, or vice
Why
versa.
Why do we make it so complicated if we're trying to make it simple for them to use this as a first and last mile?
Well, we're making available virtually the same fares on Microtransit with a couple of exceptions because of not having EFC readers that are available to the rest of our passengers. People can still use a single ride fare. They can purchase the weekly pass if they want. They can use their Eco Pass or their Ed Pass and use it for visual inspection. So we are trying to make it available to other riders in other markets as possible. The weekly pass is a new product that we're testing as part of this pilot, but it's not the only product that will be available to people. So we're trying to make it as seamless as we can with transferring to other services and have as many of our fare products and fare media accepted on Microtransit as they are on the rest of the system.
So I had a
As
question.
complicated as it is.
Because I do understand the reason to collect the data, but is there a better way to look at this and say, you know what, if you download this app, then you have free access for a month or something like that? Because the goal is to get the data, right? And to encourage people to utilize that and then to thus collect it. Maybe we could look at this as, if you download the app, you have a month's worth of access within that within the VIA service area, and that's encouraging them. And you can collect and see all the data, where are they going, and all these other parameters, and then maybe look at some costs. I'm just thinking of like how UVX is, obviously that fare is covered in another facet, but that was one of the things that I think created this kind of synergistic opportunity, and I think our goal really is to see how we can translate this within our service area. And so if that's the goal, let's get the data as opposed to just, making it overly cumbersome in order to access this. Because it will benefit us far more to get the data than it will be to collect the 70 cents or the equivalent of.
So right now, I think the 70 cents is really if we had a promotional fare. The basic fare is $2.50. We do want some data on who would pay, what the data would be if it's paying the regular fare. So that's part of it. The promotion would be to allow it for $1, or maybe it's if you download, you get your trips for $1. We can take a look at that and maybe come up with a different, maybe it's not a weekly pass, or maybe it's something else. We can come back maybe and figure that out. We don't want to walk away from the pilot not knowing what we would do if we charged the regular fare in the microtransit area. I think what the team is asking for is the ability to do some promotional pricing, what you're saying, in terms of having some leeway to do some promotional pricing based on what we're seeing happening in the field. as we're going along, because we'll have a lot more real-time data with the use of the app and that activity. It's hard to know exactly what promotions we're going to need based on the data. We're able to change that potentially, but I guess we could take a look at whether the weekly pass whether we want to do a weekly pass or not, or do some other kind of promotional activity. I think what the team was asking for and why it looks so complicated is we're coming to you because the board makes those decisions to allow a change in the fare pricing for any promotional pricing, all this flexibility in there. And so I think that's part of the discussion that we were having with you today, and I think the flexibility that the team wanted.
I don't mind the flexibility. I really don't like the complexity of the process. I think we need to charge something to find out if people are willing to use the system for first and last mile or for whatever they're going to use it for. But it sure sounds like it's very complicated to me to try to figure out how to use this system. There's got to be, in my mind, there's got to be a really simple way to roll this out so that it's not really cumbersome to the individual that wants to use it, and they have to go through a half a dozen different steps that are confusing to them because they're trying to get from their home to the front runner station. And it seems too cumbersome to me.
If I could just separate it into two different groups, the first group would be those that already have a fare. And if they already have a fare, what we're saying is just go ahead and ride it. If you have an ECO or an Ed Pass, we want you to just be able to get on it. You don't have to pay a fare. Just hit on the app that you're going to pay upon boarding. And when you show up, you just show the driver your ECO Pass and you get on. So we wanted to let the entire segment with paper passes, of our riders with paper passes and ECO Passes to be able to just ride, no fare payment. And then we have the group that will not have any type of a fare payment that would then need to get on and check the box, fill out their credit card information, and pay when they get on. And then just know that they can transfer to another service and not have to pay again. And so I think we could scale back and simplify it, and we could just say, okay, no transfers. We're not doing visual validation. We're doing none of that. It's $1 a ride. So our eco riders, they'll pay $1 a ride. Our monthly pass holders, they'll pay $1 a ride. Everybody just pays $1 a ride. So to simplify it, I think we would have to bring something together like that. Otherwise, it is fairly simple for the riders that already have a fare because they literally just flash pass, their fare. But for the riders that don't already have a fare, I don't think we can escape the downloading of the app, entering their credit card information, unless, like Jaron said, they put a call into the customer service, and then we do have a workaround for that. But to your point with simplicity, then if it were $1, like you said, we're still collecting something, but the pricing is simple, and it's not a weekly pass. It's none of that. It's just $1. I think we'll get to $1 because, like Carolyn said, with our promotion, that's what we're seeking, is the ability to, tweak what the pricing will be or the discount as we go along, and need to test it if, based on VIA's recommendation, and these are some of the things that they did recommend to us, but I'm happy to take it back, or take all of this back and rethink through it if that would be helpful to you, and come back with a couple of proposals.
But just be clear, the way it regularly works is it's similar to a bus in the sense that if you get on the Microtransit to get to another bus or to tracks or to the streetcar, it's free. Same with if you're coming from Front Runner to use Microtransit or any of those other modes to Microtransit, it's free as long as you've paid your fare on the first modes or had some type of other fare media. And at that point, so that would be similar. So there's no real difference on that. The real issues are what kind of promotional pricing should we be doing? And will that get confusing? And I think the promotional pricing might have to be really potentially limited to what we can do with the app.
Yeah.
In terms of to encourage people to use the app.
Use the app.
Yeah, and that might be more of what we're trying to get. And that's one of the things we'll take a look at.
And I just wanted to echo what Ken said in terms of I am all for the flexibility component to this. And I know what I think the goal of collecting the data should really kind of should be looked at in that perspective. I agree that there needs to be a cost, because that is an element to this that will happen long term. So I completely understand all of that. I agree that this has to be something that can attract new ridership in a certain sense, right? And so we need to have a level of simplicity that I think would get us to the point where we can get maybe a little more intricate in terms of our fare structures. But I think for now, this is something that we want to look at and keep it simple.
I presented to, at this point, I've presented to all the city councils in this service area over the last couple months. And the way I told it to them is, it's equivalent. Either you have a bus or a monthly pass or an eco pass scenario, and they'll just let you on, or it's $250. And nobody balked at that $250 rate. Now, I'm not saying you can't give them some code for one-time signing up or referring a friend or something that gives them a credit in their account toward that piece. And maybe there's even a discount code that gets them, saves us money because we only process the transaction once on a credit card. There's some discount piece that gives them less than $250 a ride that they can kind of just dock off or take off that total. But I don't think that, and all those communities were willing to sort of advertise our thing on their websites. They were all ready to promote it. So I'm not sure the lift, I mean, I know that it's going to be a little bit at first, and I'm probably underestimating that. But I also think that there's just a willingness to do it. I don't know that we'll see a daily rider, but I think we'll see a two to three times a week rider hit it that doesn't use our system at all now, or occasionally drives to the thing. I mean, this is because they kind of, once they get in the car, it's just easier for them to go on to their destination, which is generally work. But a lot of them talked about the fact that if this could connect me into the system and I didn't have to go too far from my house, I'm good trying it. So I don't know. That's why with Kent, as far as the simplicity goes, I don't know that it has to be a heavy discount. If we're trying to see what the acceptance of a normal fare is, I'd love for it to be an incentive for them to sign up to be a monthly pass holder with our corporate, their employer and others who might be offering something that they've turned down in the past because it didn't connect them to their house.
Just one other thing too. I also have been talking about this pilot, even though it is not happening in any of the areas that I typically go to on city council meetings. And I always do mention the price, and I don't think anyone does balk at that price. I think the $250 is really reasonable. And when I say it's the same price as if you're going to get on a bus, even people in some of the smaller communities up in Weber County are, oh, that's great. I totally understand what you're trying to do. I think the goal is to get that integration. And so however the fares work, whether it's you offer free ones or you do something else, I think that it has to appear that it's an easy option. So however that looks, I think would be my recommendation. I think that people need to pay into it because I do want to understand that. So just that's how I would say, is if it's easy to perceive as an individual who doesn't know anything about transit, and I've never ridden it before, and I'm going to look at this, if I can figure it out easily, I can do it. And that's the key.
Okay. Thank you for this feedback. It's very helpful, and I think especially with our fair discussions going forward. But what I'm hearing from you is let's make this really simple. Let's make it easy to understand. We don't necessarily have to integrate into what we have now, especially if that's going to be changing in the future. But let's just take a look at this kind of by itself and get in place what works, regardless if we, not necessarily if we feel like we have to mold it to what we have now, but let's just have a good out the gate experience with fares with this.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the work that you put forward. Don't get us wrong.
I agree.
And we know
It's important
new for us.
No, it's been a learning exercise, and I think it just speaks to, if we can't integrate this into our fare system, then clearly our fare system is too complicated.
But I want to just.
Yeah, clearly it is.
I just want to clarify that we still are going to proceed on a $2.50
Sure.
base fare, and the issue is really just so that
Sure.
what's the
Yeah.
promotion type activities that we might be coming back with.
Yeah, either the 250 or somebody who holds one of the passes.
So I think there's a table in your attachments that puts the transfer table in and
Right.
pretty much holds sort of what we're doing, the base fare and the transfer table. I think, is the board comfortable with that? And then it's really the promotional pricing.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with the $2.50. I think we need to lay it out there so that people know that they're going to pay something. But we need to make it very simple for them to implement, to actually access the pass or whatever it is, so that they're more likely to actually ride the system once it gets into place. That's the concern I have. Do we make it simple for them to use it?
So, Trustee, can I clarify one thing? Because this keeps coming up. So it is about simplicity. So when the customer actually uses the app to book a ride, it's going to give them the price in the app. And for all basic purposes, we can say that's $2.50, right? And so as we as a team say we want to test some promotional fares, and maybe during the first month of service we want it to be $1, the customer is going to open up the app and say it's $1 for your trip. So they're not going to have to do anything but actually book that trip, and the price is established in there. Maybe they refer a couple people to come download and try the service. They may automatically get emailed a code that says, now you can input this promotional code and get 2 free rides, which they could just do. And then when they request a trip, that there's going to be no cost to that trip. The other option within the app is going to say when it's time to pay, you can say, I can pay on board. So a customer who has a current UTA Pass product would just say, I'm going to pay on board after requesting that trip and get on board and show that pass product.
For the pass.
Correct.
Okay.
So I know this does sound very complicated, but from the customer's perspective, our intent is to try to simplify it as much as possible. And throughout the course of the pilot, we'll have time to continue to make improvements and look for ways to integrate pass products either into the app itself or look at potentially just putting like validators on the vehicles too. So it's a goal over the next 12 months to continue to make fares part of this and to simplify it for the customer as well.
Is it your plan to say, let's say we start with 250 and we don't do a first month discount or anything like that. So 3 months into this thing, we want to try something on a different fare. And so we lower it from 250 to 1 at that point in time for the next week or the next 30 days or something. Are you planning to do that kind of sensitivity to the fares as you go through this, so that the fare might be $2.50 this week, but only $1 next week, and then back to $2.50, which further complicates what I don't know?
Let me speak to that a little bit. Yes, I think the information that you see in your packet with a list of potential promotions,
Right.
this has entailed a lot of discussion that we've had with VIA, as they have done this in other markets and some of the best practices and things that they've seen work. So some of the ideas that we are considering would be something at launch. Obviously, when you launch a new product, we've done this on other line openings, that is kind of an immediate hook, come give it a try. So those are some things that are on the table. VIA has also expressed some options with referrals. They've had a lot of success with people who have already downloaded the app. Hey, refer a friend or refer a family member, and both of you, get a free ride. So that's a very distinct marketing strategy if we're wanting to attract additional riders beyond those who have already downloaded the app to get referrals. They've also got some promotions they've had success with rewarding existing riders. So if you're seeing 2 or 3 rides a week, but maybe you want to see if you can encourage them to bump it up to 4 or 5, there are some promotional ideas that would get to those strategies. So what we've asked for a little bit of flexibility for is based on how the pilot is going, and with a little bit of flexibility to respond to what we're seeing in the market. Because that's part of this, is to identify the markets and the people who are most likely to use this service. Are they current UTA riders? Are they non-riders at all? Could they be potentially both? And so all of those promotional ideas have different strategies, either with initial launch or referrals or with reward programs. So those are the things we kind of like to be able to test and try during the course of the pilot.
You would certainly
To
want to be
learn.
able to do that, sure.
To learn, yes.
And I think that the question, like Carolyn said earlier, is do you want us to come back in every instance and every promotion that we do? Do you want us to bring those back separately and individually? Or are you okay right now understanding the idea of some of the type of the promotions that are going to happen if we execute them throughout the year pilot? Or would you like them brought back individually one by one? Our request is to have the flexibility, but again, that's up to the three of you.
So I can kind of comment on that, because I think it would be a very good perspective for us to understand what you're doing, because this is a pilot. I know it's a little more cumbersome on this side of having to do that, but I think that from a communications perspective, when we're talking to people within our communities, and this is not just Salt Lake, I think that Davis and Weber as well, I think for them to understand what we're doing and what we're trying, I think it's valuable for us to have that data. I don't know if you actually have to come back. That I think has a little bit of flexibility, but at least I would like to know if you have, in 2 months' time, you decide that we're going to do something completely different, I would like to know that so that I can articulate that. That's just my perspective on that.
We could continue to come back with reports. Like every few weeks, we'll let you know what's going on with the microtransit. Might be useful as well.
I think the report would be fine. I don't know that we need to approve every time you want to try something new. I think you ought to be flexible enough to do that.
Yeah, and we'd be happy to do that. And we'll be gathering data with any of the promotions that we do. Obviously, both us and VIA as the operator is very interested in that information. And it just helps us through the pilot program learn what our most viable markets are and what they best respond to. So we'll be monitoring it very closely. We'll be happy to give you regular reports.
And I had one other question, and this is not in regards to the fare strategies or anything. What does that vehicle look like? Is it branded with UTA and VIA? How does that work? And if you don't have that right now, if you could let me know what that looks like so we can.
Yeah.
We are working on that right now with VIA. So our approach, because it is kind of more of a co-branding effort, is we've been having close discussions with them and have been going through a complete branding exercise. So we are working on what the vehicle will look like, but it will look like UTA as well and have UTA, but also be very clear, since they do need to download the VIA app, and we want to make that very clear to people as well. So it will be co-branded, but very much within our branding guidelines and standards.
Thank you.
And in my note, we are intending to come back here in early November prior to a launch to give you a full update prior to launch of the program.
Thanks.
So I know this is, did you have a question?
Well, I just have an issue. I know that this calls for some kind of a motion for approval. And I don't know.
I'm personally not ready to vote.
I am not either.
I'm ready
That's
to vote, but I'm not probably ready to vote to approve it.
I'm not either. That's the reason why I'm.
So there are some parts of it that aren't quite setting well, I guess, and I just either need some more time to think about it, or would like to see some revisions. It's probably a little bit of a combination.
Okay, perfect. I can go to work on that. Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you for the feedback.
No, thank you. Our next item is a discussion item in regards to Committee on Accessible Transportation Charter. And Sharisa, excuse me, I knew it was, I was not going to say it right. Sharisa Aldridge is here, and welcome.
Thank you all for taking some time to talk about the CAT committee, the Committee on Accessible Transportation, not to be confused with catnip. They are substantively different items. So my name is Sharisa Aldridge. I'm the ADA Compliance Officer here with UTA. In addition to responsibilities to ensure that we comply with all 5 titles of the Americans with Disabilities Act, I'm also responsible to support the Committee on Accessible Transportation, or again, the CAT Committee. I'm here today to talk to you about approving a charter later on in the month, but I recognize while you're familiar, because you have all been very engaged with the CAT Committee over the last few months, I understand that it's still relatively new. So I want to introduce the CAT Committee, talk about some of the history briefly, talk about some of the things the CAT Committee is currently working on, and then how the CAT Committee interacts with or should interact with the board, and then answer any questions that you may have. So the Committee on Accessible Transportation, or CAT Committee, is a citizen advisory committee. It was formed by UTA to give feedback to UTA about UTA-specific facilities, services, programs, those types of things. And the emphasis there was on accessibility, and not accessibility in what we were probably familiar with in broad terms, but very specifically to ensure that individuals with disabilities have access to our services, programs, facilities, vehicles, those types of things. And so the UTA recognized the value of that feedback from the disability community as we're planning these types of activities, above and beyond what I'm familiar with, which what the ADA requires. It's important that we have the perspective of our riders with disabilities from the outset to make sure that our services are accessible. So with that in mind, the CAT Committee is, as I mentioned, a citizen advisory committee. It consists of individuals with various types of disabilities, family members of individuals with disabilities, representatives from disability service agencies who all volunteer to come to UTA and give us feedback. Because we do value that feedback so much, we have designated the CAT Committee as the vehicle through which we will receive feedback from the disability community. And again, the CAT Committee is one of, my understanding, only 2 citizen advisory committees at UTA. So very important role that the CAT Committee has. The CAT Committee is intended to represent the broad range of disability experiences that our riders have, and it is very, very broad. So in order to meet that, we do currently have a membership that represents 13 different types of disabilities or disability experiences, combinations of disabilities, different ways to experience the same disability, all of those types of things to come back to UTA. Because, for example, an individual who is blind and uses a cane may have a very different experience riding our services than an individual who is blind and has a guide dog. So when we set up the CAT Committee, it was intended to have that broad representation to ensure that we could understand the variety of needs that the disability community may have. Currently, the CAT Committee is fully constituted. I've got a slide here about the evolution of the CAT Committee. So I've been with UTA since 2016, and probably much like the board during that time, we've kind of tried to work through figuring out what makes sense for the CAT Committee to really engage with UTA. Because as much as we want feedback at UTA, we want the members of the CAT Committee to feel like their feedback is valuable. It's not very fun to come to a meeting and give feedback and then, okay, thanks, and we never do anything with it. And at the same time, we didn't want to have meetings just for the purpose of having meetings. So in the last 3 years, there's been an evolution of the CAT Committee, not in terms of the purpose of the CAT Committee, that's always stayed the same, but in terms of the functionality of the CAT Committee, if you will. So where the CAT Committee used to have monthly meetings of the full committee, now those are quarterly, and one of those quarterly meetings has actually been designated as the ADA celebration, not only to reduce kind of administrative burdens here at UTA, but again, to make sure we weren't asking these volunteer individuals to come to meeting after meeting after meeting. In addition to the quarterly meetings of the full CAT Committee, I did mention we have the ADA celebration, which Trustee Holbrook was able to attend this past July, very successful. We do training for CAT Committee members. if we think fare is complex to understand, trying to understand all of the UTA system and the fare is equally complex. So we feel that it's important that CAT committee members have an opportunity to really receive some training on what we offer here at UTA. Some of that is also because we have CAT committee members who ride only paratransit. So asking them to give feedback on Frontrunner, for example, without some exposure to what it looks like at Warm Springs or what it looks like at Jordan River or those types of things really puts them at a disadvantage. So we've really invested in the last few years in terms of making that training for the CAT members more robust. Over the last few years, we've also kind of streamlined the subcommittee process. We used to have 4 subcommittees. The charter that you guys have a copy of says there are 3, and that's true. There is an executive subcommittee, a services subcommittee, and a planning and community outreach subcommittee. But for practical purposes, only 2 of those subcommittees meet regularly. The executive subcommittee is just there in the event there are functional issues with the CAT that need to be resolved. And fortunately, knock on wood or something, we haven't had too many of those in the last few years. The focuses of the services subcommittee is exactly as it sounds. It's on services, making sure our services are working for the disability community, comply with UTA's obligations under the ADA, those types of things. And then the planning and community outreach subcommittee is really intended to support the visibility and functionality of the CAT committee. So planning the ADA celebration, recruiting new members, working on the CAT charter, those types of activities are all things that subcommittee is involved in. One of the things that I think should definitely be highlighted in regards to the evolution of the CAT committee is that we currently have a fully constituted committee, which means every position on the committee is full. Last year we had 5 positions available and we had 30 people apply. This year we had 1 position available and we had 10 people apply. So as we were looking at that, that's exactly what we were hoping to accomplish. That the community sees that UTA is engaging with this committee and they feel committed in spending some time here. So a little bit of history in terms of the evolution of the CAT committee over the last couple of years. I do want to give you a sense of kind of some of the things that the CAT committee is currently working on. I've mentioned that the CAT committee is intended to give feedback to UTA. So certainly UTA staff come to the CAT committee and say, okay, we need help with XYZ project. At the same time, the CAT committee members join the committee because they have things that they're interested in having us work on as well. So some of these goals that you've got in front of you represent kind of that mix and match, if you will, of perspectives. Generally speaking, the entire CAT committee is very committed to and interested in increasing the recognition of UTA's efforts to improve accessibility. I think we have a great system here at UTA. It's one of the most accessible systems that I'm familiar with. And the CAT committee wants to recognize that, in part because they want everybody to know we're doing a lot of good work at UTA, but we also want to encourage people with disabilities to feel comfortable riding our services. So the CAT committee is very focused on that. One of the examples is the awards that the CAT committee is now giving out quarterly, whereas they were annually, because as we recognize the good work that our employees are doing, we're hoping that that kind of promotes continued good work. So in terms of the services subcommittee, a couple of things that they're working on currently is providing technical assistance on our stop announcements to make sure that they're accessible for everybody, supporting our efforts to improve communication with our riders when there are service delays, outages, those types of things. We have asked the services subcommittee to give some feedback on proposed edits to the Paratransit Riders Guide. And then, as I mentioned previously, we have some diversity in terms of experiences the CAT committee members have with our services. So they've set a goal to become more familiar with those services. We're working on planning a tour of Warm Springs, and they're very excited to go over to Riverside and see what it looks like to maintain a paratransit vehicle. They had an opportunity to ride one of those in August and had some thoughts about maybe how we could make that ride a little bit better for our customers. So they're looking forward to that as well. In terms of the Planning and Community Outreach Subcommittee, they're very interested in extending the reach of the awards. UTA is a big organization. We have a lot of services, and we know that employees in all of those service areas are doing excellent work. And they want to make sure that we're representing everybody and giving out those awards. And then they want to improve the visibility of the CAT itself by including information on UTA's website about the CAT committee. It's something that they've seen in other transit agencies, and they'd like to highlight that here at UTA. Again, it's very important, but many in the community just don't know that we have a CAT committee and that we're working on that. And then the travel training department has asked that we help, or the CAT committee help create a community resource list. If you're familiar with travel training, you can go there for free and get training, whether you have a disability or not. But that service isn't necessarily going to meet the needs of everybody who needs help in the community. And they want not to just say, I'm sorry, we can't help you, but this isn't our area of expertise, but here are a list of resources to help you. Because for many people with disabilities, that's a gap in terms of community engagement. And they've asked the CAT committee, given their experiences, to help create that list of services. So that's a little bit of the history, things that the CAT committee is currently working on. Before I move to connection between the CAT and the Board of Trustees, do y'all have any questions about any of that? Okay. So here's why I'm here.
Just say how valuable, as I hear their comments and feedback on things that we're doing, it really is very valuable information. So thank you for your work on it, and hopefully it continues for a long time.
Thank you. I will pass that along. They will really appreciate hearing that. And one of the things that they really do appreciate is that this board has been very engaged with the CAT committee. I mean, I've highlighted here that there's language in the bylaws for the Board of Trustees that indicates there will be a connection. Really, the reason that I'm here today is to present you with a draft charter, because the bylaws for the board say that y'all will be the authority in terms of approving a charter for the CAT committee. But I do think that it's a really nice relationship that the board has developed with the current CAT membership, and I'm happy to pass along that feedback. Chair Christensen, they'll be very happy to hear it. So in terms of next steps, again, the goal today is really to give you some information about the history of the CAT committee, highlight the connection between the CAT and the board as far as approving a charter. Next steps are that the CAT committee will have their quarterly meeting on October 21st. During that meeting, they will be voting on a resolution to send to the board acknowledging that they agree with the language in the proposed charter. And from that point, that resolution will be brought to the board on October 30th for your formal approval and adoption. So that's kind of where we're at in that process and where I anticipate this process will go. Do y'all have any questions from me at this point?
No questions, but I do want to just say that I really enjoy watching you engage with everyone on that committee. That you are so fabulously passionate about it, and it really shows. And I think that they appreciate that as well. So thank you for all that you do on this. And with that, I didn't have any questions. So
thank you.
Thank you for that update. We'll look forward to any feedback they have on the charter, and certainly ultimate passage the week after. So thank you, Sharissa. Our next item is just other business, and note that we have no meeting next week, and so our next board meeting will be on October the 23rd at 9 a.m. With that, I would ask for a motion for adjournment.
second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Our meeting stands adjourned. Thank you.